Hello, I'm French, so I apologise in advance if I make any mistakes. As I said, I live in France, and this story happened to me this summer, just after the lockdown ended. I was, and am still 19. After this lockdown ended, I went to my grandparents to spend a few weeks. I got tested before, and no problem there. My grandparents live in a small city in the north of France, and they have a dog who's quite big. When I was really young, I lived at my grandparents for a year, and at the time, the dog was only a puppy. Her name was Chippy, in French, which kinda means little devil in English, but in an affectionate way. Considering when I was living there, I played with her a lot. We were both really close, and this will have its importance later. Two of my hobbies are having long walks and running. Thus, every evening, I was going out for a long walk with the dog. There's a track that follows a path through the forest, then there's a small hill, and on top of that, a big place with lots of fields. I run there a lot and I know the place. The air's fresh and the view's quite beautiful. So I was going there with the dog every day. It was also helping my grandparents to have her doing lots of exercise. The first time we went there, nothing special happened. We just enjoyed our walk. It's about 6 or 7 kilometers, so basically an hour walk. The next day, when we arrived on top of the hill, in a field, it was probably around 10 PM, but there was some light because it's summer. There were 3 other people walking in the field. They were younger than me, probably 15 or 16. I also noticed they were smoking, so my guess is that they used to come here so they couldn't be seen by their parents. We went past them, and I greeted them, and they greeted back. Once again, nothing special there. For a whole week, I did this walk around the same time, 10 PM, and passed those 3 guys with nothing special happening, and it was perfectly fine to me this way. My second week, as I usually went for a walk with the dog Chippy, and arrived at the fields, there was only one of the 3 boys. He wasn't smoking this time though. When he saw me, I was at the entrance of this field just after the little hill climb, so the entrance of the forest was just behind me. He did a sign with his hand to catch my attention and asked if I had a lighter, which I actually had in my pocket. I told him, yeah, sure. So he walked to me, hands in the pockets of his hoodie. When he came near me, for some reason I felt a shiver. It's crazy how sometimes your instincts know there's a problem, but you don't listen to it because nothing looks weird to you. I handed over the lighter when he passed by. At that moment, my dog was staring at him. Then everything happened really fast. He did a really fast movement with his hand, coming from the hoodie, and I only saw something shining. I just had a reflex of throwing myself back, so hard that I fell down actually, and I then realised it was a knife that he was holding and he tried to stab me. What saved me is my dog, God bless her. When she saw the guy trying to stab me, she jumped up on him and he fell down. As I said before, he's a really big dog. I immediately got up on my feet and heard something from behind me, from the entrance of the forest. I saw 2 guys wearing animal masks run into me. They were probably the true friends. In this kind of situation, your brain just acts for itself. You don't really think at all. It's just a case of the answer was found and it was really simple. The other guy was still on the ground. I just watched my dog and told her, run. I started running and she followed me. But I heard the worst possible thing from the guy who got up. We'll catch him. Don't let him go. At this moment, I was totally terrified. I was just running and running, and I was hearing them running behind me. I was only thinking, how long are they going to follow me, and who the hell are they? This was the time I was really happy to be a runner. I was clearly better than those guys, and that totally saved me, because they chased me for something that felt like an eternity to me. Fortunately, at the end of the field, there's another entrance to the forest, and this time it's a descent to the end of the road. I heard the steps of 3 guys vanishing as I arrived at the end of the forest, though I didn't stop running until I arrived at my grandparents' house and locked myself in. I caught a massive breath and gave her a huge hug. I saw in her eyes that she totally understood what happened, and I've never been so happy to have her in my life. After that, I told everything to my grandparents, and we called the police, but they didn't find anyone. I really don't know what these guys wanted, but the animal masks make it seem like it was some kind of satanic ritual. I really don't want to know anyway. I still do long walks with Chippy, the hero dog, but I now go earlier, into places with a little more people. I hope you enjoyed my story. Again, I apologise if it is a bit all over the place. I'm French and my English isn't great. And to the 3 guys in the forest, let's never meet again. Hey folks, I'm kind of new and this is my first story I've submitted here, so let's get started. I must clarify, this didn't happen to only me, but my uncle too. This was after a Christmas Eve party, and when everyone went home, I decided to stay because my cousin and I were watching a movie. My uncle, who used to walk his dogs in the woods next to a park, went off to take them out. Before this, my aunt told him not to do that because it was too dark out there. It was around 4 or 5 a.m. He didn't care much, and he went off anyway. My aunt was still worried, so I went along with him. Everything was quiet. My uncle and his dogs were having a relaxing walk as usual, and I wasn't really paying attention to the surroundings, when suddenly the dogs went still. This wasn't that strange. They always stopped in their way to stare or bark at other animals, like rats or birds or insects or other dogs. However, this time it was different. When the dogs went still, my uncle and I noticed something was going wrong. The dogs weren't angry or curious, they were kind of nervous, anxious and afraid. One of the dogs, the largest one, was growling and shaking. As my uncle started to get worried about the situation, we heard it. People in the woods. We didn't see how many because of the darkness. They were saying something.
We all gather here by the blood of...
Then we couldn't understand.
We...
Then we couldn't understand again.
Thee and I.
And then we couldn't understand again. As my uncle and I heard that, he yelled for his dogs to follow him out the woods. As we all left, he turned his head back and he only saw the slight movement of the branches and shrubs. Perhaps because these people were trying to hide. After all that happened, he hasn't walked his dogs near those woods, nor will he do it again when it's dark. So to the strangers in the woods, let's never meet again. So this happened a year ago, and I'm still pretty shaken by this whole event. I thought I'd tell my story. I live in the UK and it's autumn, and it gets dark around 4 PM. There was a school autumn break that week, so all the kids are at home, so that means my girlfriend's brother was home too. I'd been with her a year at this point, so her family knew me pretty well, and her brother enjoyed my company. She'd recently been pretty stressed out. Her parents were going across country for the day, so she had to look after her brother, but I thought that I'd give her the day to herself so she can just cool off. I asked her parents if I could look after their son for the day instead, and they agreed. So I came around 8 AM, and they let me in before they set off. My girlfriend's brother woke up about an hour later, and she followed shortly afterwards. We went out for breakfast at a local cafe together, and went back to her house when we were done, and once I dropped her off, I took her brother to the park. We got there at about 2 PM, and the place was pretty packed. Eventually, the sun started going down, and the place was completely empty by 4 PM. I texted my girlfriend, and told her we'd be home in a bit, and she said okay. I'm gonna be honest, I completely lost track of time. Me and her brother were having fun, being the only two in the park. Me and her brother were stood up on this really tall climbing frame with a slide on it. It was almost pitch black at this point, so I was using my phone as a flashlight. A notification popped up on my screen, and it was my girlfriend asking where we were. I responded, "Oops, coming home now," and told her brother we had to go. He sighed and asked if we can go down the slide, so I said yes. Before I went down, I knew what the park looked like. There were streetlights all around it, benches everywhere, some trees, and places for kids to play. When I came out the slide, there was something weird. A man had appeared out of nowhere and was stood beneath one of the streetlights. He had a trench coat on and a beanie hat. I immediately got my girlfriend's brother behind me and called out to the man with a friendly, "Hi there." I got a response. He started groaning. I noticed that he was swaying back and forth in the light, and he had his mouth open, drooling with a blank look in his eyes. This made me feel really uneasy. I picked the little bro up and kept checking on this guy the entire time. There was an exit to the left that led to a path back home, so I left out that way and kept checking behind me every few seconds. The guy was still stood there. The path where the guy was stood merges with a big main path if you walk out through some bushes, and so does one I walked through. I was walking down the path for about 2 minutes, periodically checking behind me, and thought I was in the clear. I wasn't. I was on a straight stretch of path with lots of streetlights when I saw him again. He was stood beneath one, looking up at it, and he was playing with something in his hands. I looked a little closer, and I realised it was a knife. I kept walking and walking, checking behind me constantly. My girlfriend's little brother was so scared, he had his head tucked into my chest. I noticed that the guy seemed to be moving into the streetlights whenever I turned around. Initially, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but then I started counting them and realised the 2 streetlights behind him had definitely turned into 5. I could faintly hear the groaning noise, and he was occasionally moaning as well. I picked up the pace and turned the corner, getting closer to the last stretch of street before I got to my girlfriend's house. That was when I heard him behind the rows of bushes. That moaning noise really sounded angry now, and I heard heavy footsteps bounding down the path. The man was absolutely running. I had immediately broke into a sprint and didn't stop until I turned an alleyway at the front of the street and got behind my girlfriend's house. There's a big bush there, so I crouched down behind it and spammed her phone with messages to open the back gate. I hugged her brother close until she opened it for us and got us in quickly. It felt like years. I went to the front of the house and it confirmed that I'd managed to shake him. He was now in the street, circling where I'd been, outside the alleyway just moments ago. He was still moaning. He had that knife in his hand still. He started kicking people's bins over. I called the police immediately, but he was gone by the time they arrived, and as far as I know, they never found him. There was a similar incident near the area a few months ago I saw on Facebook, but I don't think anything came of that either. Her parents thanked me for keeping their son safe and didn't hold any ill will against me for the situation. He went back to normal pretty much the day afterwards, but he still had nightmares about the event. When my country isn't in lockdown, I'm allowed to look after him with my girlfriend, funnily enough, but we haven't been to that park ever since, and I still check over my shoulder and break into a cold sweat every time I'm alone in the street. So I've recently discovered this page and thought I'd share my story here. I'm not sure if this belongs here, but I don't know if it would fit anywhere else. So I lived in a pretty nice area with my husband and some family friends. We lived there for a few years with nothing bad happening around us. It felt like a very safe neighbourhood. Now for context, I'm a very short white female and considered disabled even though I look fine, but I could never really beat anyone up since my disability has limited my activity severely. Anyway, on to the story. This happened about a year before we moved, and I had some stories pop up on Facebook of some traffickers that were targeting women and children at the local store that we live right behind. I was freaked out, and so I made it a point not to go to the store without my husband. I still got the news articles about people being followed and grabbed and kidnapped from the store, but I felt pretty safe as long as I didn't go anywhere without my husband. I was going to work one day. I worked about 15 minutes away from my house. It was a call centre kind of out in the middle of nowhere. There were fields every which way. I worked at the afternoon shift and was one of the last people to leave at night. I had to stop and get gas and was a little freaked out because I was scared to go anywhere without my husband, but I wasn't going to make it to work and back home, so I had no choice. I stopped at the station and was slightly relieved that it was super busy. I got out and pumped my gas when this big van pulled up in the spot next to mine. A guy got out and started pumping his own gas. Then he walked around the pump and got in between my car and me. He smiled and said, "Wow, your car's so clean. How'd you get it so clean?" I was flabbergasted at the question. My car was a mess. It was dirty with bugs and stuff on it. "Why don't you show me how you get it so clean?" He reached out to touch me, but I jerked back. Another car pulled up behind me and the guy got out. I think he freaked the guy out because he walked back to his van. I quickly finished pumping my gas and got into my car, locked the doors and sped away. A few minutes later, I look out my window and the van is behind me, riding my bumper pretty much. I could see the guy smiling and laughing with some other guy. I was pretty freaked out, but figured he was going to the freeway. We passed the freeway, but he kept following me. Now I was really freaked out. The only place on the road now is my work. I called my husband, but he didn't answer since he was at work. I was freaking out, so I just picked up the speed and continued to work. I kept looking back, and the van was still there, but just a little bit further back. I made it to work. It was a large building with lots of cars in the parking lot. I parked right at the front of the doors in a handicapped spot and ran into the doors. I looked back through the doors and I saw the guy stopped in front, looking pissed. I ran up to my department and went right up to a friend who was an ex-military guy. He carried a couple of guns on him at all times. I cried as I told him what happened. I got to work and was still freaked out all day. We closed and I was walking down to my car. I peeked out the windows and that's when I saw the white van. I couldn't see anyone in there and I wasn't even sure if it was the same van. I ran back to my department and told my friend what was going on. He pulled out his gun and walked me outside. The van had now moved right behind my car. My friend walked me to his car and we got in and he drove me right up to my car. Then he followed me all the way home and sat outside until I was inside the house. I could see the van following us, but once we got past the freeway, he turned onto it. The next afternoon on my way to work, I passed a gas station and the van pulled out. Again, they followed me to work, but then turned away once I got to the parking lot. This went on for about a week. They would follow me to work, leave, then be outside when I was leaving, and my friend would walk me out. My body told me that they were probably trying to learn my schedule so they could figure out a time to jump me. He insisted that I take one of his guns, just in case he wasn't there at work to walk me out. I didn't want it though, as I was afraid that if I had it, then I'd get pulled over for something and get in trouble for having a gun not in my name and not having a permit for it. I was telling my husband that evening and how his van was still following me, and he suggested that I should call the cops and let them know. I honestly don't know why I didn't think of that. So the next morning, when I was about to get ready for work, I called. I told them everything, then I left for work. Just like clockwork, the van pulled out of the gas station and started following me. We were on the long stretch of road that nothing was on when I spotted a car parked off to the side of the road. I passed, and then the car passed, and then the lights came on. The van was pulled over. I later found out that the men following me had several warrants for rape and attempted kidnapping. The back of the van had knives, ropes, gloves, masks, chloroform, and some other sketchy crap in it. The cops believed that I was going to be their next target. When I got to work, my friend wasn't there. He was sick. I'm so glad that I called the cops that morning, because I don't think I would have made it home if he wasn't there to walk me out. Anyway, that's my creepy story. I hope you guys liked it. It's 100% true. We have since moved out and I live in a not as nice area, but so far I haven't noticed any creepy people around. But I always carry pepper spray whenever I go out. When I was 13, I broke my leg in a nasty bicycle accident. I ended up in a plaster cast from my hip to my ankle for 8 weeks. As it was coming up to Christmas, my younger brother wanted to go to the theatre to see the Christmas show. I was 13, moody and accompanied with a bright pink cast everywhere I went. I was not feeling it. My dad, never one for going to the theatre, offered to take me to Pizza Hut instead. It was a rare opportunity to spend time with my dad, who had often been working very long hours. He worked as a police officer, which at the time, I didn't really take an interest in what he did. We had a great evening, and we came back to the car with full bellies and some leftover pizza. I remember babbling away to my dad, as I had been the whole night, enthralled to have my dad's undivided attention. After a while, I noticed he wasn't really responding anymore. We were fairly near home, but still on the main roads before we turned off to our housing estate. At first, I thought he'd just lost interest, but I glanced across and noticed that he was permanently looking in the rearview mirror. I asked what was up, and he said, "That car behind us has been following us all the way from Pizza Hut." I glanced behind and commented that we were still on the main roads, and I couldn't see that this was an unusual route for this guy to take. He said I need to see wherever he is. I don't want to lead this guy to our house. I rolled my eyes. My dad was always paranoid about this kind of stuff. We wouldn't even tell our friends we were going on holiday because he was convinced the house would get broken into whilst we was away. We were coming up to a residential area before ours that I knew from doing a newspaper round. I suggested the street coming up on the left, as it loops around in a horseshoe shape through an estate and brings you back out to the same main road we was on, just further up. Nobody would take this road to come out onto the main road again. My dad turned off, and so did the car. I will never forget that feeling, that sinking feeling as I watched the car sharply turn behind ours. The car placed its full beams on. I let out a gasp and I looked at my dad. He'd gone into work mode. He had completely shut me out. He accelerated down the street, and as we came to the main road, I saw there were many cars still on the main road. He pulled straight out onto the main road, meaning the car coming on the main road needed to brake sharply and held down their horn at us. I kept my eyes on the road ahead of us, breathing deeply as my dad weaved in and out of the lanes. A part of me was completely terrified, and a part of me was still convinced that this wasn't really happening, that he had exaggerated or mistaken this. He wasn't really following us. I dared to look in the side view mirror, and saw it was a different car behind us. I felt myself relax a little. We turned left at the coming roundabout, giving very little room to anyone, and a few moments of holding my breath, thinking we were going to hear the sound of metal on metal. The street we had turned onto was slightly quieter than the road previous. I slowly glanced into the side mirror, and it was a different car behind us. I sighed relief, and thought that it had been really my dad's imagination. Suddenly, the rearview mirror became a little bit more illuminated again, and I awkwardly turned in my seat to see a car pull out sharply from behind the car behind us, and pull quickly into behind our cars again. I looked at my dad again. He grabbed his phone from his pocket and told me to call someone in particular in his phone and put it on speaker. My hands were shaking. I could barely press the buttons. A cheerful voice answered before he could say anything else, and my dad quickly summarised what's happened. There was a pause. I could hear the voices speaking in the background, radios beeping and answering through radios. My dad barked at me to keep naming the streets we were on to the guy on the phone, as my dad randomly turned down the streets, trying to keep to the main roads. I'm randomly calling names and trying to remember to see the direction we was heading in. The car was so close behind us and completely blinding any view behind us. All I could think was please don't hit us. If we crash, we can't run. What the hell can I do? My leg had only just been blasted. I knew I stood no chance. I suddenly wondered if they were getting close enough to take a shot at us. This, for me, was unthinkable. It was England. This isn't the norm. Why the hell would someone shoot us? We continued to weave down streets and random turns as I tossed around in the front seat, clutching onto the mobile in my trembling hands. The voice on the phone shouted, "Turn into the Tesco car park that's coming up on the left. We have 3 response vehicles coming from the other direction." My dad sharply turned into the car park, skipping the red light. I shut my eyes, again, waiting for the sound of metal on metal. As we swung into the empty car park near, the car behind us was in close pursuit. Blue lights surrounded our car for what felt like all directions. The sound of sirens was deafening. My dad got straight out of the car and ran behind the car. I screamed, thinking someone could have a gun, and tried to look over my shoulder to see, when my door swung open and a police officer was crouching into the car to help me get out. My arms were complete jelly, and I couldn't even use the crutches to help me stand. Another police officer came between them and helped me as I hopped to the back of the police car. They were kind and tried to distract me as I was trying to see what was going on and where my dad was. I couldn't really see from my ankle, and I also couldn't turn properly due to my leg. They did their best to reassure me, and one had clearly just been through the nearby McDonald's drive-thru and offered me his tea. I just sobbed, begging them to tell me what was going on. My dad, after some time, came over to the car and told them to take me home. He had checked, and my mum was back home with my brother. As the police car turned around in the car park, back towards the entrance, we could see the police surrounding the vehicle, and 3 men who looked to be in their late 20s were handcuffed, leaning over the car, whilst a sniffer dog and 2 police officers were taking things out of the car, one of which was a baseball bat. When my dad got home late that night, I asked him what that was all about. Who the hell were those men, and why were they following us? He was very reluctant to tell me anything. He did admit it was because of him that they were following us. He explained that he was in a drugs team that dealt with, how I understand this as an adult, the interception of large shipments of drugs that were being transferred across the country, and sometimes people lost a lot of money when they were caught. I just stared at him. I had no idea what to say. He just shrugged and said, "Sometimes people get upset about that." I was on a date in Camden with a girl who, from photos, I wasn't overly excited about, but in the flesh made my eyebrows shoot off my head. She was really pretty and smart and funny. We had quite a few cocktails, and I think it was the Blues Kitchen, before going to the gay bar in Camden, which had since closed down. I think it was called the Black Cap. The day was going well, and we meet these people who join in our table, and the guy tells me at the bar my date said she wanted me to kiss her. I did, and it turned out the guy was just helping us out by moving things along. My date was really shocked and told me it was bold, but she liked it. She came back to my hotel room with me, which was like a 10-minute walk away. The room was kind of small but cool, with a space-age sort of style to it. We were both drunk and made out a lot. She started crying about problems she was having with a friend who was really sick and her job that was really stressful, full on sobbing. She left in embarrassment, even though I wasn't worried about her leaving like that, but she said she'd be okay. As she left, I saw a large man in a black thick leather jacket in the corridor. He was staring at my date as she left, and then stared at me as I closed the door. I was pretty wasted, so after checking my date got on a bus, I had a nap and was woken by banging on the door. I ignored it, but then it just kept going, so I staggered up to the door and opened it a crack. I recognised the leather elbow and arm as the door was shoved open violently. I was drunk, and the jolt of the door caused me to fall over. Luckily, the room entrance was small and around the width of the door, so my back was against the wall by the door, whilst my feet touched the other wall. My body kept the door closed as this man kept shoving against the door. I managed to get it closed again, locked it, and went to sleep as I was still drunk. When I woke up in the morning, I thought I'd dreamt the man at the door. But when I looked up and down the side of my ribs, my hips and my thigh, I had dark bruises. I was really lucky, and I'm so glad that my room was tight on space, because if it hadn't, that guy would have got in so easily. So, I take my dad's ashes up to Glacier National Park every year. I lived in Colorado when the story happened, and I was headed south through Idaho after I had visited Montana. My car broke down in Salmon, Idaho, and a really nice man helped me out. I was headed through the mountains to Boise to visit a friend. It was about a 5-hour drive before I entered the truly mountainous section of Idaho. I saw a hot spring on the side of this 2-lane highway along the Salmon River. I decided to take a dip after the stress of having my car breaking down. The hot spring had a bathhouse up at the top near the road, and a wheelchair ramp that went down to the area near the springs, where they were on the other side of the river. People had created little bath-shaped sections in the river that were separated by river stones. Actually, you could sit in a spot that was shaped like a hot tub, so that it held the water from the hot springs while the river rushed over it. I got out my car and headed down the hot spring. I took my dog with me. It was twilight. About every half hour, a car passed by. Knowing that I was alone essentially, I took my top off. I was sitting in the hot spring and actually took a photo of a car approaching. The car pulled up next to mine, in front of the bathhouse. It was a truck with 3 men in it. Seamlessly, one of the men got out of the driver's side, and 2 men got out of the passenger side. They moved without qualms, and were covered in heavy black gear. They looked like hunters. I couldn't see the expressions on their face. The driver headed down the wheelchair ramp towards me, not hesitating. He took big long strides. I recognised that there was danger. The 2 passengers from the other side of the car headed down towards a steep bank along the wheelchair ramp, taking a shortcut. I was stuck in between both parties. Hastening, I hid and dressed myself under the water while my dog growled. He never growls. I've only ever heard him growl twice all my life, and this was the second time. The driver kept on walking towards me. He walked out onto the rocks into the river, continuously walking towards me even though he was covered in heavy gear that could get him waterlogged if he fell in the river. The other 2 passengers from the side of the car were also walking out on the rocks, directly in front of me. The driver got so close that I had to grab my dog before he lashed out at the driver. I was freaking out. The man was walking out onto the stones so that he could reach me. He was not hesitating. I couldn't see his face. I grabbed my phone, my keys, my clothes. I dragged my dog in between the two parties, my heart in ears. The driver would not stop. He turned around very quickly, making an arc, coming for me still. He was still taking big strides. The passengers were walking towards me as well. I was trapped in between them. I ran up the bank, dragging my dog pretty much by his collar all the way into my car. The only way that I could get into my car without them grabbing me was by throwing my dog into the back and lunging myself into the passenger side door of my car. I threw my keys into the ignition and turned them when the men were walking up between my car and their car. I happened to hit the lock button on the door right when they walked up. Before anything else happened, or before I saw their faces, I ended up throwing myself into the driver's seat and reversing my car and hightailing it out of there. I drove to about 20 minutes down the road. I crossed a river on a bridge and hid my car behind a bank near the other campers. It was well hidden from the main road. The campers were looking at me and wondering what was going on. I sat, I waited. Another 10 minutes passed by, and lo and behold, the truck drove by. The hunters were looking for me. I managed to wait another half an hour, and then drove up to the mountains, over to Boyce and into safety. This is by far the creepiest and spookiest experience that I've ever had. This happened at the school I went in the Philippines, which was a local Catholic one, but not that kind of strict. To describe where it happened, my classroom that time was at the end of a hallway located at the first floor. It was also across our mini library, where our kind librarian sits behind the door. Besides that library were bathrooms for girls and boys. The girls' bathroom is bigger with 3 cubicles inside of it. The boys' one was just an entire bathroom without a cubicle. It's way back in 2003. I was in 3rd grade. It happened during those summery times, 2-3 o'clock on an afternoon. We had an ongoing class at the time in that classroom when I excused myself to go to the bathroom. When I walked across the hallway and reached the girls' bathroom, just a brief description of how the bathroom looked like. When you enter, a big dirty scratchy mirror on the wall will welcome you. Beneath it was a clogged and dirty sink. Beside the sink were cubicles, 3 of them, made of soft aluminium material. The lock of the doors were broken. This is an important detail of the cubicle. So, when I entered the bathroom, I was the only one in the area. No other students inside the boys' bathroom or the other cubicles. All the doors of the cubicles were wide open. I'm the usual scaredy cat girl, so I went inside the first cubicle. Since the locks were broken, I just held the door while peeing, so if anyone entered, they would know I was in there. I was finishing my business. A sudden gush of wind entered the bathroom and I felt someone, a presence, entered the bathroom. I waited for that someone to enter one of the cubicles, but nothing happened. I was clueless, and I didn't think it was a ghost at first. But I heard the faucet in the 3rd cubicle opened and water was flowing. I, without thinking too much, peeped below the cubicles. There was no one, no feet, nothing, just water flowing. I freaked out too much, so I hurriedly fixed my uniform, and when I was trying to open the door, it wouldn't budge open. Remember, the lock was broken, so just a little touch will help it open, but it was not moving. I was so hysterical that I was punching the door so much that it had dents in it. I was screaming, crying, and really scared. I tried kicking the door, but it just won't move. I screamed louder. My throat was getting sore until my teacher and the librarian hurriedly went to me. They opened the door, mind you, without any force. I was dumbfounded, and they asked me what happened, and I told them everything. They just stared at each other and gave me a faint but worried laugh and helped me get back to class. It was the scariest feeling I ever felt because I felt helpless. I remember stories of other students seeing ghosts and such in school. Some say that the school was initially a rice plain where salvaged bodies were usually thrown. So I guess that can explain it all if it's true. 18 years have passed, and that memory is still clear as glass. I hope that will never happen to me again. I have a few stories left, but nothing beats this one. Hey, I'm Frankie Goss. Been a long time listener, and I've been contemplating on sending my stories in. I assure you these experiences are not fabricated and are 100% true as I remember them. I'm a 33-year-old man. I would like to share a series of paranormal experiences I had when I was 16 or 17 that really jump-started my hobby in ghost hunting and paranormal investigating. Since I was a kid, I was always into the paranormal as far as I can remember. I even have faint memories of earlier paranormal experiences when I was around 10 years old, such as seeing the Hat Man. Never even heard of the Hat Man phenomena until in my late 20s, so it could have been my imagination. I have also heard scratching from beneath my bed, which my mother shrugged off by saying it was the cats. But it couldn't have been the cats, for the cats she was talking about were outside. The scratches came directly beneath my bed. But the experiences I want to share now happened when in my mid-teens and were truly profound, totally unexplainable, and some were even frightening. This post will be long, so be ready to read for like 15 minutes. I was about 16 or 17 years old, living in a small town called Caledonia in the province of Ontario, which is in Canada, and these paranormal experiences happened around 2004. I had a daughter at a very young age, so while I went to school, I also worked on the side in a small restaurant that mostly sold pizza and breakfast, and business was usually slow. It was located on Argyle Street, right across from a bank and 10 or 15 feet away from the famous Caledonia Bridge. If you were to be driving into town, coming from the city of Hamilton, it would be on the left side of the road before the bridge. Its exact address was 12 Argyle Street, North Caledonia, Ontario. I scored the job from my friend Graham, who I went to elementary school with when I was younger. His mother owned the place. When I first started working there, I didn't feel anything bad or thought it was haunted, although I got an eerie feeling in the basement. But what basement doesn't give off an eerie feeling in an old building? I didn't think much of it. I worked there for a week or two before I experienced anything. And I did work alone in the beginning. Later on, an older girl named Lindsay, who I think was about 19 or older, started working with me, and shortly after that, things started happening. As I said earlier, business was usually slow. I spent most of my shifts watching DVD movies alone, or with Lindsay in the dining area. Now, before I describe the paranormal experiences I had there, I want to describe the layout of the restaurant. It was as follows. Picture it from topographic view like blueprints. Picture a square. At bottom center of the square is the front entrance. The middle of the square is the dining area, all tables and chairs. At the top center of the square is the entrance into the kitchen. Now picture the top right of the square is the entrance to a hallway that extends 12 feet or so. So to verify, if you understand the description, if one was to come out of the kitchen, the hallway would be on their left, and if one were to enter the front entrance, the hallway would be on their right if they were walking past the dining area. Looking down the hallway, it has total 4 doors. 2 doors on the left. First was a male bathroom with 1 toilet and sink, and a female bathroom a few feet down the hall, also 1 toilet and sink. 1 door at the end of the hallway, which was a janitor's closet, and then 1 door on the right, which is literally directly across, in front of the male bathroom, which is the entrance to the basement. So when one comes out of the male bathroom, first thing they see is the basement door, and they would have to turn right to get back to the dining area. Basement door has a small padlock on it, and one would see the inside of an apartment door or house door to keep strangers out. Lindsay and I talked a lot since business was slow, and it didn't take long until we both discovered we have similar interests in the paranormal. One day at work, she told me about her passion in ghost hunting, and how she captures unexplained anomalies, taking pictures and videos of alleged haunted locations. one of which was the Blue Ghost Tunnel in St Catherine's, 30 to 45 minute drive from Caledonia. This intrigued me because I heard about that place on a TV show called Creepy Canada. I asked her to show me these pictures and videos, and one day she did. On another day at work, I saw her many pictures of orbs of different colours and pics of white mist that she claimed wasn't smoke or condensation viewed on her laptop. But what intrigued me the most was the VHS tape that she played me on the TV in the middle of the day in the summer. Cannot see their breath as they talk. To their surprise, the entire entrance to the tunnel and the tunnel itself is filled with thick white fog or mist, seen kinda twirling. As they enter the tunnel, one can see it's cold in there because one can see breath as they talk in the middle of a hot summer day. Can't say it was 100% paranormal, but it was bizarre. This influenced me to go there myself, which I did many times in the day and night, and I never experienced or saw any thick fog or mist during the day or night as seen on a video. But I did experience the capture of paranormal activity, which I'll save for other stories, which I have photos and videos of, including the first class EVPs. The reason why I'm telling you all this is because shortly after her showing me this and talking long hours about ghosts in dining room is when paranormal activity started happening in the restaurant. And looking back at it now, I think talking about it triggered it. I don't know. Now onto the first experience. Lindsay and I were working together and I had to take a leak, so I told her I'd be right back. So I walked down the hall like I did many times before and I opened the male bathroom door on my left. I enter it, and as I enter, I go close to the door, observing the basement door directly in front of me, and it's closed and locked as usual. I close the door completely and turn to walk to the toilet 3 or 4 feet away from the door. Now I have my back turned to the door. I whip it out and start taking a leak. As I'm urinating, I hear the door open and become ajar behind me. I didn't know what to think because I thought it was Lindsay and was asking myself in millisecond thoughts, why would she do that if she knows I'm pissing? Maybe she wants to see my privates. Typical stupid thoughts of a teenage boy. I also thought maybe she's playing a joke. So I laughed at myself and finished my business and wanted to go to the dining room to ask her why she opened the door. So I proceed to walk towards the ajar door and I open it. To my surprise, I see the basement door is unlocked and wide open, and I can see down the stairs to the eerie basement. But it was closed and locked a few seconds ago, I say to myself. How didn't I hear the padlock unlock and the basement door open? I brush it off as Lindsay opened both doors, and maybe the stream of urine hitting the water distorted the noise. I quickly concluded and was certain Lindsay was playing a joke on me, because all of the intense ghost talks we've been having in the past couple of shifts. I calmly shut the basement door, locked the padlock, but I felt super uneasy. I proceed towards the dining area, and she's not there because she said she was going to make herself food. So I enter the kitchen door on my right after coming out of the hallway. I see her cooking herself something, and I ask her, "Did you open the bathroom door and basement door while I was using the restroom?" She replies kind of surprised, giggling, "No, why?" Then I got the biggest shivers down my neck, with fear coming over me, and I said, "Don't mess with me, Lindsay. Someone just turned the knob on the bathroom door while I was taking a leak and opened it a bit, and when I finished, I opened the door and the basement door in front of me was unlocked and wide open." She got a bit of fear in her facial expression and said, "No, I swear to God I was in the kitchen the whole time. Are you serious?" Asking me to verify that I'm not playing a joke on her. I felt like she was being sincere, but I was unsure of her sincerity. We both searched in the restaurant and found nobody. But now as I'm typing this, I remember we never checked the basement. Nothing else happened for the rest of the shift. Both of us were left thinking one is messing with the other. My next shift, I was supposed to work alone. I told my boss about the experience and I told her I think it's haunted and I refuse to work alone. I thought she'd think I was crazy, but to my surprise she believed me, and with a sigh she said she knows it's haunted and didn't force me to work alone. So stayed with me on my shift, and later set out my shifts so I'd have someone with me. Most of the time it was with Lindsay, who worked with me. Like 95% of the time it was her. As time passed over the course of a few weeks, the basement door started to unlock and open on its own almost at least once every shift, and most of the time it would be open while Lindsay and I were not in the same room. So I lost the fear, became conditioned to it, and even started to suspect that perhaps it was Lindsay playing a joke on me all along. This is until one day it happened to me while we were in the same room. We both saw the basement door locked and closed 100%. We were both doing work in the kitchen. As we both finished in the kitchen and want to go watch a movie in the dining area, we exit the kitchen, and to our surprise, the basement door is unlocked and wide open. We both look at each other with fear, but a bit of excitement as well, because experiencing paranormal activity gives one a high, a rush of adrenaline, and makes one question reality, especially after confirming that it was indeed with no real explanation. I'm sure you and our listeners who have a go at ghost hunting and paranormal investigating, who have experienced live in the moment, know the feeling that I'm talking about. We both know that no one else is in the restaurant, and both know 100% the door was closed and padlocked. She expressed to me that she thought I was messing with her the whole time, and I tell her I thought the same about her. We both know that this is real. This is actually happening. A ghost is actually toying with us. We shut and locked the basement door and act like nothing happened. This time, the ghost did something it hasn't done yet in the weeks prior. It opened the door again and again. We closed and locked it each time that night, but it kept opening the door. We decided to take pictures in the basement. We captured white, blue and red orbs. After we took pics, the activity stopped. As I remember, we finished our shift and closed the restaurant. Our next couple of shifts, it got scarier and more intense. Not like horror movies, but the activity actually started to increase and become somewhat aggressive. I don't remember how many shifts this transpired over, but I'll tell them the best I can in the summary below. One time the basement door kept opening and we kept shutting it, but it wouldn't stop opening it. Kinda scared us, but annoyed us more. So one day I got courage after it opened the door, and I stood at the top of the basement stairs and said to the ghost, "Listen, you've made your presence known, and we know you're here. Can you please stop opening the door? It's scaring and annoying us." After I said that, I shut the door and locked the door. What happened next scared the crap out of me. I was in the dining area looking down the hall at the basement door. I literally look away for maybe 2 or 3 seconds, look back and it's open. Send shivers on my arms typing it. How did that door open without me hearing it? Can they mute sound? Can they pause time? Surely I would have heard the padlock and the knob turn. But I didn't even though. I was only like 7 feet away from the door. Out of all the experiences, this was one of the most profound ones that made me want to scientifically research the paranormal. Not only did I not hear sounds, but I don't even think 2 or 3 seconds is enough time to unlock and open that door. How did that door open so quick without making any noise? And the fact that I asked it to stop and it didn't frightened Lindsay and I. Almost as if it said F you through its actions. Lindsay decided to talk to it at the top of the stairs and shut and lock the door. To our surprise, it stopped for the rest of the shift after she told it to stop. I theorised it was Mal and didn't like me, but it liked Lindsay because she's a girl. I don't know, I was trying to make sense of why it listened to her and not me. Another time we were both in the kitchen, and when we both came out, and as usual, basement door open. But this time I felt an angry presence. When I entered the hallway to close the door, I heard noises and noticed all 4 doors were open. The mail field my bathroom doors, the janitor's closet door, and basement door are open. Upon further investigation, the noises I hear are usually tap water running in the washrooms and janitor's closet, and all sinks have hot water running, creating condensation in the bathrooms and closet. I shut off and closed all the doors. I was scared as hell. Then what happened next was profound. Lindsay and I walk into the kitchen, and the big jug of olive oil was moved into the middle of the kitchen within seconds of us exiting and re-entering the kitchen. How without any sound? Now that I'm older, I do not get as spooked as easily. Or should I say, I still get spooked, but got a lot more courage now. I usually run towards the activity and not run away from it, hoping to catch my experiences on camera so I can share them with the world. But 17-year-old me was not having it. I quit working there because the activity was getting super intense. Too bad I didn't set up IR cameras in the room overnight at the time. A couple of weeks after I quit, I later heard from my boss, or former boss, that it escalated to ripping the cupboard door off. I didn't talk to Lindsay for many years. I'm talking about well over 10 years, and my experiences became distant memories. I often wondered if what I experienced was real or not. One year, actually not too long ago, found me on Facebook and confirmed all my distant memories are real. She remembered everything I did. The restaurant eventually went out of business, and the building was vacant for years. Today the building is owned by a company called Seguin Engineering. I emailed them and explained who I was, and that in the past I've experienced paranormal activity there, and asked if staff experienced anything, and if I could do a professional scientific paranormal investigation there. They replied that no paranormal activity, and I cannot investigate. I hope you enjoyed my true ghost stories. I have many more ghost stories. Some of them I can even supply photos, videos, and ghosts for EVPs. Some of them I can even supply photos, videos, and EVPs. I also have other interesting stories such as close encounters with UFOs. One story I call the brightening dimmer light entity, and stories of creepy people of me running into occult practicing dark occult rituals in the forest by the Hermigate in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Thanks for letting me share my story. I hope it gets to read on your channel. Sincerely, Frankie Goes. Hi Redditors. I have to tell you what is happening to me at the moment since October 20th. I hope I'm not in the wrong sub because the story isn't over. I live in a small condominium in a very quiet area in one of the biggest cities in France. My apartment is on the ground floor at the very end of the building. In short, no one has to pass in front of my place because to access the upper floors is done at the other end through the parking lot. However, at the very back of the residence, there's a common garden through which it is possible to access the floors. It's stupid. The path is longer and muddy, but it's possible. Many newcomers use this path. I get along very well with 4 of my neighbours. We talk every day for several hours, to say the least. I have taken my dog out several times a day. They keep me company and protect me. On October 18th, my neighbour confides to me that he has seen someone passing in front of her window as she's in the apartment before mine. The man would thus have passed at my place to reach the floors, so he passed on my ground. I don't want people I don't know to cross my property. It's my yard and it excites my dog. Otherwise, she barks and disturbs the neighbourhood. On October 20th, the man passed by my house while I was taking the dog out in the common garden with my neighbours. I kindly asked the man not to pass on his land, and I reminded him of the real way to reach the floors. After, he asked me if my dog was dangerous, so he wanted to reach the floors by the common garden. He started screaming, arms in the air, looked like an angry bear. Horrific. He seemed crazy. He yelled at me that he would send my dog to the shelter, that he could do whatever he wanted to, and that he knew the common rules. After yelling 1 or 2 minutes, he left mumbling. We were upset, but we never thought he would get his revenge. Here is the list, with all the days, of all the surprises that he reserved for me, even though at the time we had no proof of those actions being his. 23rd of the 10th. Theft of 2 pairs of shoes that I left outside. Dirty. It's to take the dog out in the mud. 25th of the 10th. My car scratched and a tyre deflated intentionally. 28th of the 10th. Theft of my 4 garden chairs. My last pair of outdoor shoes and my doormat. 29th of the 10th. 2 intentionally deflated tyres. 30th of the 10th. Destruction of my mailbox lock. Destruction of the padlock of my parking gate and attempt to destroy my lock of my door. From that point on, I'm just terrified. Do I have to go back to my parents? I'm afraid for my dog. She's everything to me. She saved my life so many times. I filed a complaint with the police and I don't want to play his game. On the 30th of the 10th, we installed a small camera hidden in a plastic flower pot and dead leaves on my land between some bushes. We waited for only one thing, that he came back. To have proof for the police and to identify clearly the man. He has a very particular style. Maybe I could get my stuff back if he didn't do anything with it. And damn, the pose of Evie, little name for our camera in public, I love you Wally, was effective. It took several days before Evie was filming more than just stray cats. Meanwhile, I was terrified at home, wondering if he was going to smash my car or try to poison my dog. I started to almost have panic attacks at work. Since I was late a couple of mornings when my tyres were deflated, I had to endure stupid remarks from my bosses. A lot of anxiety. On the 4th of the 11th, Evie filmed the guy stealing 2 pairs of shoes that I had left behind to lure him, and at night, at 1 o'clock in the morning, he knocks over my ashtray in front of my door. I've got him. I've got him. Oh yeah, I was ecstatic. I can prove that this is the same man who verbally abused me and is messing with my stuff. I immediately notified my neighbours, and in the morning, as she left for work, my neighbour saw him chatting in the parking lot, and she took a picture of him. I can even compare it to the videos, and I can prove 100% that it's him. I wouldn't let him hurt me or my baby. I went to tell the police this morning to show them videos and make a joint complaint. Yesterday, Evie filmed him trying to get into my house. I'm afraid to be home. I don't sleep at night anymore. I'm afraid to leave my dog alone at home. I think I'm gonna move. Even though I was perfectly fine in this apartment, my mum wants to get a lawyer, and I'm so afraid of her retaliation. Sir, please understand that I just want to live my life without any more problems than I already have. Please stop, and don't ever let us meet again.